This is R2D Tech, and today we're going to have a look at the ASUS ZenFone 7 Pro, so stay tuned. So once again, you've got your typical glass sandwich with aluminium frame, which is always really nice to see. But the main selling feature on this phone is actually an uninterrupted, fully immersive display. And by uninterrupted, I mean it has no notch and no punch hole or anything like that. And the way they've managed to achieve that is actually by having a motorized camera unit which rotates out from the back, so you can use that as your selfie camera. Now, they had this on the ASUS ZenFone 6 as well, but this one is slightly different and we'll get onto the cameras later, but the motorized unit is actually slightly faster as well and smoother, I think, in my opinion. So it's actually a bit nicer to use. Onto that display, you're getting a really nice 6.67 inch Super AMOLED panel with a 1080p resolution and 90Hz refresh rate. Now, the 1080p resolution, I think, is more than enough. Yes, some phones offer 1440p at the moment, or even 4K if you look at some of Sony phones, but I personally think it's kind of unnecessary and you won't really tell the difference unless you're really looking for it. Now, the 90Hz refresh rate is really nice as well. It will just make scrolling through the software a lot smoother and it will seem faster than using a 60Hz panel. Yes, it's not the 120Hz that you get on some Galaxy phones, but again, it's not a big deal. 90Hz is still really nice. Now onto the cameras, which I think are the most interesting part of this phone. Usually I would talk about the back cameras and front cameras separately, and normally the front cameras are slightly disappointing, but in this case they are the same thing, since the back camera just rotates out to become the front camera, which I think is great because you'll get all the functionality that you get on the back cameras on the selfie side as well. So on this phone, you're getting a really high megapixel count on the main lens, 64 megapixels. Of course, this doesn't always translate to a great image, and I would definitely recommend downloading the Gcam APK because I think Google's software processing is definitely the best. Now, you also get a 3x 8 megapixel telephoto lens. That 3x is quite nice and it can go up to 10x digital zoom, but it's only 3x optical, which is an important case to make. Now, I think this lens is quite useful, but more importantly, you also get a 12 megapixel ultra wide lens, which I think is even more useful when you want to capture more in your shot. Now, in terms of video, this is where I think the phone really shines because, again, that front camera is the same as the back camera due to that motorized system. So you can film up to 8K 30 frames per second, which seems to be becoming a lot more common nowadays. But that's actually amazing, especially if you want to use the phone for vlogging as well as filming things in front of you. Of course, the phone can also film 4K 60 frames per second, but quite surprisingly, for me at least, it can also film 4K 120 frames per second, so you can get some really high resolution slow-mo as well. In the spec department, this phone is also quite impressive. I think it's one of the first phones to get Qualcomm's latest and greatest Snapdragon 865 Plus, which is great to see. In terms of RAM, you're getting 8GB and that's the only option. I think this could have been a bit higher. We've seen phones with even 16GB of RAM, but to be honest, it will probably be just fine for the everyday tasks. Now, in terms of storage, again, there's only one option, which is 256GB. This should be sufficient, but if it's not, you've always got cloud services and also expandable storage with this phone, which is really nice to see. When it comes to software, this phone is running Zen UI 7 as a skin over Android 10, which to me looks quite similar to stock Android. So if you are a fan of stock Android, then this should be pretty good for you. But what I will say is definitely go to a shop and try it out yourself, just to be sure that you're comfortable with this software experience before you buy the phone. Now let's talk about I/O, which if you didn't know means input-output. You are getting dual SIM slots on this phone, which if you're a professional can be quite useful, especially if you travel a lot or if you want to use the phone as both your work phone and home phone. Now, the other thing you're getting is expandable storage, as I said before, which can be quite useful, especially if that base 256GB of storage is not enough for you. The only disappointing thing with the I/O, apart from one main flaw, which I'll get into in just a second, is yes, it does have stereo speakers, but unfortunately it does seem that the bottom one is more powerful than the top one, which means that when you're watching content horizontally, it can seem a bit imbalanced, which is a bit annoying. Now the main flaw, which I guess lots of people don't care about anymore, is that they got rid of the headphone jack, which the previous model did have. Just kidding, of course that headphone jack trend has been dead for quite a long time now, and most people have either Bluetooth earphones or headphones or a dongle adapter anyway. Now the last thing in terms of I/O is, yes, you do get USB-C, which is the standard and is something which I think all companies, not mentioning any names, Apple, should comply with, especially since it would save a lot on electronic waste. Now let's get on to battery. You do get a very impressive 5000 milliamp hour battery, which is absolutely enormous, and I think I can quite confidently say that it will get you through a full day of charge, if not more. This is paired with 30 watt charging, which is quite fast. Not the fastest we've seen, but it will definitely get the job done. And they've kindly provided a 30 watt power brick in the box, which is really nice to see. And I would say it's a given these days, but some companies, and by that I really mean one company, not mentioning names, seems to have failed to provide a fast charger in their box yet again this year. In terms of some extras, unfortunately you don't get that futuristic under-display fingerprint sensor with this phone, but what you do get is a fingerprint sensor on the power button, which is just as effective and will probably be even faster. Now in terms of colors, there's two options, Aurora Black or Pastel White. Both are really nice and both have quite a nice cool gradient look. You should definitely go to the shop and check them out for yourself before you choose them. Now in the box you do get the 30 watt power brick, as I mentioned before, which is really nice to see, along with a USB-C to USB-C cable. But what you do get, which I really like, is actually two cases it seems. One plastic transparent hard case and another case which is slightly more textured. I always like it when companies throw some of these into the box, especially since you want to have your phone protected straight away. And yes, you might decide to order another third-party case later on, but it's always cool when they just give you that extra option. Now the last thing to talk about is price and availability. The phone did launch a few days ago in Taiwan on the 26th of August, and it's also going to launch in Europe on the 1st of September. Now it seems the price is going to be around £750 or euros if you live in the UK or Europe, but unfortunately it's not going to launch in the USA, which means that if you do live in the USA and you want to get it, you'll have to import it, which means paying a bit extra for import fees and taxes. Now my guess is that it's going to end up being around $1,000 if you do want to do this. The price is a bit high, especially the £750, but it's not exactly a budget phone. It's got some really nice specs, and if you compare the price to other phones like the Galaxy Ultra or the Note 20 Ultra, I think it offers a very similar feature set and for a much lower price. So I personally think it's quite a good buy. That's it for this week. I think this phone is very impressive and I think the price point again is quite reasonable. If you did like the video, then please leave a thumbs up, and if you want to see more content like this in the future, then definitely hit that subscribe button and the notification bell below. Thanks.